ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Lair of the Film Exorcist. Now tell me, won't you guys please be my neighbor tonight? Because tonight, we will be taking a look at A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the biographical drama of one of America's greatest TV personalities, Mr. Rogers. Now let's move on to my opinion. The story is based on the real life of Fred Rogers, also known as Mr. Rogers, of the well-known TV show of the same name. Now in this movie, Mr. Rogers is rightfully played by Tom Hanks, who does a wonderful job of making us believe that he is the real Mr. Rogers. Now regrettably, this movie only finished third in the box office thanks to the competition of Frozen 2 and 21 Bridges, and sadly it only received a few nominations, which to me doesn't seem justified in the least. But I guess it's because few people tell their children about this amazing man. However, I will say that I myself have not personally watched an episode of the Mr. Rogers TV show, but I have watched a documentary about him, and my parents have told me about him many times. So let's see if this movie does justice to America's greatest TV hero. Now, while I was writing this script, I was constantly worried that I wouldn't be able to do it justice, because from what I've seen throughout this movie, and from what I've heard, Mr. Rogers is an amazing person, and someone that we need the most during these times, which is why I was glad to hear that this movie was coming out. Now, Tom Hanks has always been one of my favorite actors, and this movie shows me why in many ways. He has become Mr. Rogers, and he encompasses the person that this great man was. This is not just another role, but the actual person in spirit. I just wish more people would have seen it. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is the legacy of a great man, and unlike a lot of the movies out there today, it is genuinely a great movie that doesn't rely on violence or the beliefs of one huge company like Disney. And I wish we had more movies like this, then maybe people wouldn't be so unhappy all the time, and many might actually be able to feel something, because this is a very powerful movie that even almost made me cry with how close to heart it gets with the characters. Now, every scene between Fred Rogers and Lloyd is a masterpiece. I mean, one man is just trying to help people, while the other is going through a tough time dealing with his feelings, and with so many things going on around him. I also really like how they completely recreated the show, as if it was still going on today, and we even got a behind-the-scenes look of what it's like to be a guest on the show, and what I expect it would be like to talk to Mr. Rogers in person. And I was actually glad to see the little secret they hid in the credits for those true fans of the show, and I'm not gonna spoil it because I like you guys. And surprisingly, a lot of what happens in this movie is all true about Mr. Rogers, and actually the only changes made were really to the life of the journalist, Lloyd, whose real-world inspiration was a man named Tom Gunad, who interviewed Rogers, but despite the changes to the original story, this movie is still just as real as it can be. So with that, I can honestly say that I have nothing against this movie, and that it might just be right up there on my list with movies like Star Wars Episode 3 and the first Indiana Jones movie. Which is why I'm giving this movie a perfect 10 out of 10, and just please go watch this movie, because it's just one of those masterpieces that you can't miss, even if you die. So please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and thank you for being my neighbor. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.